there is a serial killer on the loose in America. And he is not entirely on the loose. He is literally in Donald Trump's cabinet. I am talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I am not being hyperbolic. I am dead serious. There is no one in our country more dangerous, my friends, than Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Through his arrogance, his misunderstanding, his manipulation, and his messed up brain, this man, RFK Jr., could cost the lives of millions of children in our country and the hospitalization of more, and even permanent brain damage, mostly due to his insistence that childhood vaccinations, childhood immunizations specifically for diseases like measles, are ineffective or dangerous, more dangerous than the value that they provide. He is an exceedingly dangerous person. And so it is for this reason that I am thrilled that the Senate put RFK Jr. on the hot seat yesterday. And before I get into that, I want to let you know that it is quite possible that this time, if the Senate and all of us keep the pressure on, he may be forced to resign. I see this in the tea leaves, but we have to keep the pressure on. Why do I say this? Because in a dinner meeting last night, where the press was invited with Donald Trump, he was asked about RFK Jr., and he gave him very weak support. Plus, Republicans can read the polls, and most Americans support vaccinations. Now, of course, we have the governor of Florida deciding that it is okay to end the requirement of childhood vaccination in that state. Diseases cross borders. This is a disaster. But before we get into that, I want to show you what happened to RFK Jr. Then I'm going to bring you the data about why I am calling him a psycho killer, a serial killer, a man who single-handedly, through his leadership and his dismantling of the Center for Disease Control and his reliance on quackery, will lead to more deaths in this country of children than we have seen in 100 years. Now, childhood deaths is what I'm talking about. I am going to start here with this quick hit. I'm going to come back to Elizabeth Warren in a moment, but this is a quick hit, pinning him down on his lies about vaccines. Remember, we all knew he should never have been nominated or confirmed by the Senate, but he managed to lie. And senators who should have known better, Republicans I'm talking about, to doctors in particular, ignored the signs. Let's watch.
Sorry?
Anybody can get it. Senator.
Anybody. So you're saying that is now the official rule of HHS.
Okay, let me just tell you what she's asking about. The specific vaccine Elizabeth Warren is asking about is the COVID booster. Okay? He is claiming that anyone can get the booster. She is grilling him because although in many states, let me say this differently. because it's no longer the recommendation from the Center for Disease Control, that means your insurance might not cover it. Moreover, if you want to get it, there's a whole list. The pharmacy has to follow a list to see if it's approved because they're afraid of being sued. So you can't just walk into a CVS like you used to be able to and just get your COVID vaccine anymore in many, if not a majority of states. And if you want to get it, you might have to pay $200. This is a huge impediment. You have a family of 5? This used to be free? Come on. This is a problem. Let me start with this so you understand what she's asking.
I'm sorry?
Anybody can get it, Senator.
Anybody. So you're saying that is now the official rule of HHS. Anybody is eligible to get a booster by just walking into the pharmacy.
It's not recommended for healthy people.
No. If you don't recommend, then the consequence of that in many states is that you can't walk into a pharmacy and get one. It means insurance companies don't have to cover the $200 or so cost. As Senator Dr. Cassidy said, you are effectively denying people vaccines.
We're not going to recommend a product for which there's no clinical data for that indication. Is that what I should be doing?
What you should be doing is honoring your promise that you made when you were looking to get confirmed in this job.
You're going like this.
And that is, you promised that you would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. You just changed the classification of the COVID vaccine.
I'm not taking them away from people, Senator.
It takes it away if you can't get it from your pharmacist.
Okay, look at this man. He looks like an over-grilled hot dog. No offense to hot dogs or people who like tanning booths or tanning cream or spray tans. You know, if you want to look that way, great. Listen to his voice. Look at his attitude. Look at his history of quackery. Okay, there's more. We get Senator Maggie Hassan now. That was Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. Now we're going to get Senator Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, adding to the pylon. This is important.
Everybody can get the vaccine.
Because you are citing data that you won't produce to the public.
You're just
and you
making things up.
Rejecting
You're
science.
making things up to scare people, and it's a lie.
With respect, I do not think I'm the one making things
You
up.
are
Thank you,
lying
Mr. Chair.
right now, Senator.
Oh my God. Let's look at what was on the screen here. MSNBC was sharing some vaccine facts. Studies repeatedly show mRNA COVID vaccines are safe and effective. Studies show vaccinated individuals fare better against COVID infections than those who are unvaccinated. Studies show COVID vaccines are safe for children and severe side effects are low. And studies repeatedly show there is no link between vaccines and autism. There's more. Let's look at Reverend Warnock from Georgia, also a senator.
It's clear that you are carrying out your extremist beliefs, which is why you attempted to fire Dr.
Senator, we're the
Menard.
sickest people in the world.
I'm
We're the sickest people on earth.
I'm speaking.
How am I a threat?
Secretary.
Okay. He says we're the sickest people on earth. I just want to say that's not true. Secondly, I want to say his focus on chronic health conditions should not be to the exclusion of preventative health measures like vaccination. Yes, do we have problems in this country, especially with type 2 diabetes? Sure. Cancer? Yes. We're going to talk about what those causes are, but there are some really good solutions. There are new medications, including GLP-1 antagonists. Those are the Ozempics and so on that people can take to change their, how their insulin levels spike, and they will not just lower their the indicators for diabetes, but also lose weight and decrease inflammation in their body, right? Making them less susceptible to certain diseases. There's, of course, also long histories that he knows about, environmental harms such as agricultural chemicals. Let's see what he says about that. because if you follow the money, he has backed off on trying to stop big ag from poisoning us, okay? So here's this guy, not exactly the picture of health, leaning back with his fucking arrogant attitude. This man who thinks he should decide who lives or dies. And basically, it's going to be all of us, right? The super wealthy will still make sure their kids get vaccinated because they think they are superior, right? Donald Trump thinks his people have good genes. So they're, if they get a vaccine, big deal, right? Big deal. They didn't really need it. They'll get it. The rest of us, they consider livestock. It's disgusting. Let's play this more.
Secretary Kennedy, for the first time, we're seeing deaths from children from measles. We haven't seen that in 2 decades. We're seeing that under your watch. You are a hazard to the health of the American people.
Can I respond to that, Senator?
No, I claim back my time.
We need to wrap
You are
up.
a hazard to the health of the American people. I think that you ought to resign.
I think he ought to resign too. Now, I've got a few more clips, but I want to show you the data now. This is from a study that was published in Lancet. I believe that this is a chart, and I'm going to show you a different one shortly, but this is a chart consolidating this information. And I think I'm going to back out of here so you can see it a little bit better about childhood vaccinations. This is worldwide. And this is shown between 1974 and 2024, in the last 50 years, lives saved by childhood vaccinations. The total line on the top is for all these childhood vaccinations, 153.84 million, close to 154 million lives saved. Of those, that longest bar is measles. 93.71 million. So close to 94 million lives saved in the last 50 years because of eradicating, at least we thought we had, measles. Then you get tetanus, whooping cough, tuberculosis, and it goes on and on and on. Look at these numbers. Now, I want to add, when I say that RFK Jr. is the most dangerous man in America, I also want to give you the data here about what we're talking about in this country, right? So what we're talking about here, let me just pull this up. This is from the National Institutes of Health. Okay, we've had a resurgence, as Warnock said, of measles. We've had measles outbreaks because people are not getting their children vaccinated. And this is the Center of Disease Control's information. This is why he wants to fire them, and I'm quoting. Severe cases of measles require hospitalization. Based on historic data, the CDC has estimated that approximately 1 in 4 cases of measles in the US resulted in hospitalization, and 1 in 1,000 cases resulted in death. More than this, without vaccination, there would be 400,000 additional hospitalizations. This would cost $3 billion US, and it would be 1,800 deaths annually. If a man were planning to go into nursery schools, what do we call the preschools, or into daycares, or into the crib in your own home, and say that next year or the year after, he wanted to kill 1,800 children and hospitalize nearly 500,000 children, do you think he should be stopped? This is what we are talking about. It's serious as hell. Let's look at what Bernie has to say. And I'm going to get a Republican on here too, questioning him. Hold on.
Beautiful bill threw 15 million Americans off of health care, substantially raised premiums. It is going to have a terrible impact on nursing homes, community health centers, rural hospitals all over America. Very briefly, it's not really making America healthy again.
It's going to have it's going to be the biggest infusion of federal dollars into rural health care in American history.
Yeah, you know why? Because you're cutting $150 billion for rural hospitals. You're putting $50 billion back. That's not an infusion. That's a loss of $100 billion.
Oh my God. Bernie brings the math. Now I'm going to get two more Democrats and I'm going to show you the Republican pushback, if you can call it that. This is Senator Cortez Masto also putting his feet to the fire.
So you're saying the CBO and independent agencies that validate the costs are wrong?
That is CMS data.
Okay, so let's just focus on the cancer drugs. Why aren't we negotiating those and bringing those down for families? Why does the bill exempt those?
It's part of the MFN negotiations. I'm not sure of that provision in the bill, of the one beautiful bill, but
You're not sure of the provision, the negotiation provision, and how exempted
for
cancer drugs?
Keytruda.
Your agency is responsible for that negotiation, and you don't know about it?
I know that we're negotiating in the MFN
Let me ask you this, Mr.
negotiations.
Secretary.
Cancer drugs too. So we've talked about COVID boosters. We've talked about childhood vaccinations. We're talking about cancer drugs and cuts to rural hospitals. Let me now throw in Senator Warren one last time, and then we'll get the Republicans.
The head of the CDC, that if she refused to sign off on your changes to the childhood vaccine schedule, that she had to resign?
No, I told her that she had to resign because I asked her, are you a trustworthy person? And she said no.
Oh my God. First of all, she denies that. And also, who on this planet believes him? If you ask someone, are you a trustworthy person? Can you imagine them saying no? He's fucking lying on this.
So if you had an employee who told you they weren't trustworthy, would you ask them to resign, Senator?
So I'm sorry, but this is not what she has said publicly. She has said.
I'm not surprised about that.
So you're saying she's lying?
Yes. Every conversation I had with her, there
And
were
let me get
witnesses.
this straight. This is the same person that less than a month earlier, you stood next to her and described her as unimpeachable. And you had full confidence in her, and that you had full confidence in her scientific credentials. And in a month, she became a liar?
Yeah, you should ask her what changed. And by the way, a month ago, you were voting against her. Oh, because you thought she was either incompetent, ineligible.
Okay. It's unbearable, but there is more. And then I promise I'm going to shift with some other really cool, this isn't cool, some really interesting breaking news that will be a little shocking to you. Okay, so this is Republican Senator Barrasso, who happens to be a doctor, and he, in his own genteel way, pushes back.
Smallpox, Washington preserved the Continental Army,
Oh.
which allowed our...
I'm sorry, he's getting back to the American Revolution, when experiments with inoculation because of smallpox was critical, saved the life, as he's mentioning, of the Continental Army. And so let's listen to what Barrasso is saying.
By protecting his troops from smallpox, Washington preserved the Continental Army, which allowed our nation to continue to fight for our independence. And like President Trump, I believe President Washington acted decisively to protect Americans' lives at a time of great national peril. So over the last 50 years, vaccines are estimated to have saved 154 million lives worldwide. I support vaccines.
I told you.
I'm a doctor. Vaccines work. Secretary Kennedy, in your confirmation hearings, you promised to uphold the highest standards for vaccines. Since then, I've grown deeply concerned. The public has seen measles outbreaks, leadership in the National Institute of Health questioning the use of mRNA vaccines, the recently confirmed director of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention fired. Americans don't know who to rely on. You know, recent polls said 89% of voters, 81% of Trump voters agree vaccine recommendations should come from trained physicians, scientists, public health experts. So, they believe, Senator Marshall, Senator Cassidy, they believe me when it comes to vaccines. If we're going to make America healthy again, we can't allow public health to be undermined. So could you?
Okay. So that's the way he confronted RFK Jr. These guys shouldn't have believed him, and they should do something now. Cassidy is also a doctor, the person he mentioned. Now, this is the part. Now, I'm going to tell you something that no one has been focusing on. Last night, I read an amazing opinion piece in the New York Times that mentions Chuck Grassley. I was hinting at before. So let me tell you the headline for this, and then I'm going to share the clip. So this is a small but telling moment in Kennedy's hearing. And this is a piece by Jessica Gross. And she said, kind of like what we have seen so far, that there was a lot of yelling in the Senate on Thursday morning when the Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., came to defend the many boneheaded decisions he had made recently. Those choices include his firing of Susan Monarez, the director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, who says she was let go because she refused to approve people who had made anti-vaccine statements to a vaccine advisory panel. The Food and Drug Administration, that's one thing he did that was boneheaded. The other thing she lists is the Food and Drug Administration's restricting access to the COVID vaccine against the recommendations of scientists. And then, of course, the third thing she mentions here is his canceling of almost $500 million in mRNA vaccine contracts. So she mentioned that Senator Ron Wyden, who we did not hear from this morning here, accused Kennedy of filling his organization with a cavalcade of, quote, conspiracy theorists, crackpots, and grifters. So what Jessica Gross said is she expected to see this. But what she did not actually expect was what happened when Chuck Grassley spoke. So I want to share with you Grassley, and it's hard to read between the lines. I'm going to give you a clip, and then you're going to understand how to follow the money here and how corrupt and craven and demented RFK Jr. is. If you didn't think so already, we have more. Okay, so let's do this.
Hearing, you told me that you agreed to leave farming regulations to the Department of Agriculture and EPA. Do you think that any comments you have made since your confirmation on topics dealing with agriculture are consistent with what you said in January, that USDA and EPA ought to be regulating farming, and that the Department of Health and Human Services should not seek to regulate farms, the tools they use, or the markets that they sell into?
Yes, Senator, we are working very, very closely with Brooke Rollins and with the agricultural community. We've met with over 140 farm interests over the past 3 months to incorporate them to make sure that the MAHA agenda is consistent with their agenda. We are producing the best food in America, that we're protecting our soils and our soil microbiome, and that we're protecting all kinds of farmers, including those who want to transition to regenerative agriculture. We're consulting every stakeholder in the farm community in everything that we do.
Okay, guys. Every farm interest, every stakeholder. He didn't say family farms or big agri. He didn't say chemical companies, or he was very vague here. So what I want to explain to you is what that was about. What this author I mentioned, Jessica Gross, the opinion writer, had to say. So let me translate that. Grassley said that Iowa farmers had expressed concerns regarding some of Kennedy's statements and asked him for a commitment to staying in his lane when it comes to regulating agriculture and the environment. Unlike Kennedy's combative responses about the corruption of the CDC officials he fired, he talked about different priorities of his, but assured Grassley that he was, quote, making sure the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, agenda is consistent with farmers' agenda. Kennedy added, we are consulting every stakeholder in the farm community in everything that we do. The exchange is revealing, Jessica added, because it suggests that Kennedy is quite willing to play ball with big agriculture, even at the risk of angering his grassroots Make America Healthy Again supporters. Many of MAHA faithful were already disappointed in Kennedy's capitulation on the environment. RFK Jr. was a respected attorney, advocate for the environment, for rivers, a respected law professor at one point. This was his area. It's what he knew about. And he is bowing down to big agriculture. He's ignoring his knowledge base. And instead, he is going to make us sicker if he gets his way. Children will have measles. We'll have people not just in the US, but worldwide, because we set the pace here. Who also helps fund vaccinations? Think about this. It is horrific what he is doing. Now, I have got some, there's a lot of crazy news, but I have got some kind of amazing news to share. So what I want to start with is something to cheer us up a bit, because I believe we can stop RFK Jr. I really do. I think it's going to take a lot, and it's going to take in part us showing up. There's another No King's Day protest. I just put up AJ's comment. It's October 18th. I'll talk about that at the end of the show. Do not feel hopeless. So what I want to share with you is Donald Trump, his war with Zoran Mamdani, his desire to try to control New York. And we talked about this yesterday, how Mamdani had said, and there are rumors that Eric Adams was being pressured or promised to something if he drops out of the race. And Trump is trying to claim he has nothing to do with that. However, let's see what he actually had to say yesterday at the White House.
Are you urging or encouraging any candidates in the New York City mayor's race to drop out, to clear the field?
No, I don't like to see a communist become mayor, I will tell you that. And I don't think you can win unless you have one-on-one, because somehow he's gotten a little bit of a lead. I have no idea how that happened, but I'd prefer not to have a communist mayor of New York City. And, you know, that's what he is based on his policy, if you look at his statements.
Okay. Mamdani is a socialist, not a communist. And if you look at Donald Trump's policy, it's closer to centralized control of businesses. And I wouldn't call it communism, but I would call it kind of a kind of corporate fascism, central government control. So I prefer not to have an idiot, rapist, dictator, fascist, sexist, racist monster as president and a serial killer as head of Health and Human Services. And I would prefer to have a socialist mayor of New York. I'm not even a New Yorker. There have been socialist mayors of New York before, but that's just me. So what I'd like to share with you now is how badass Zoran Mamdani is in response to this interference. He was being interviewed by Abby Phillip on CNN. This might be my favorite clip of all time. So I'm talking to you, Michael. If you're just listening to me, not staring at your phone, I want you to find your phone and stare at it. Anyone who's just listening, look at your television. I know some of you, are on the TV. Some of you have got your iPad. Some of you are on the phone. Watch this clip. It's phenomenal.
Let's cut out the middleman.
Okay, hold on one sec. I'm trying to get the beginning of this.
The president.
Let's cut out the middleman. Why should I debate Donald Trump's puppet when I could debate Donald Trump himself? If Donald Trump is serious about this, he should come to New York City. We can have as many debates as he wants about why he is cutting SNAP benefits for hungry New Yorkers just to fund tax cuts for his billionaire donors.
I would watch that.
So he was asked are you going to debate Andrew Cuomo? And he's like, fuck that shit. Cut out the middleman. Donald, come debate me. Man, I'm going to love this. I am going to absolutely love this when he wins. Okay. What else do I have for you? I've got some other incredibly crazy news. But first, I want to point out that the jobs report came out today. And it doesn't look good in terms of how many jobs we have added. And even though Donald Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, he's still not able to control the data. He was asked last night about what we should expect from the jobs report. Obviously, he must have had the numbers. And here is what he said.
Mr. President, tomorrow we have a jobs report coming out, the first since the BLS commissioner who you fired won't be there. A lot of people will be turning to you to see if you believe the data that's released. Can you commit to saying the data will be credible?
The number, I don't know, they come out tomorrow, but the real numbers that I'm talking about are going to be whatever it is, but will be in a year from now when these monstrous, huge, beautiful places, they're palaces of genius. And when they start opening up, you're seeing, I think you'll see job numbers that are going to.
What? I'm sorry. The real numbers will be a year from now when these monstrous palaces of genius start opening up. I feel like we need to listen to that again and all the way to the end, because I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. Let's go with that.
Mr. President, tomorrow we have a jobs report coming out, the first since the BLS commissioner who you fired won't be there. A lot of people will be turning to you to see if you believe the data that's released. Can you commit to saying the data will be credible?
The number, I don't know, they come out tomorrow, but the real numbers that I'm talking about are going to be whatever it is, but will be in a year from now when these monstrous, huge, beautiful places, they're palaces of genius. And when they start opening up, you're seeing, I think you'll see job numbers that are going to be absolutely incredible. Right now, it's a lot of construction numbers, but you're going to see job numbers like our country has never seen before. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I'm guessing that the huge palaces of genius to which he is referring relates to AI. Because at that same dinner with these tech executives, including Zuckerberg, and I think I'm about to call him Tim Apple, when they were there, apparently Melania even spoke about the first humanoid race. I don't know. So let's talk about those jobs numbers, not the numbers themselves, because they didn't look good. But Donald Trump, and this is breaking news from this morning at CNN, from Andrew Kaczynski. I saw this, that Donald Trump has a nominee for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you're not going to guess what his background is. Oh, I think you will. So this is a screenshot. It says, new. Trump's nominee to run the Bureau of Labor Statistics ran an anonymous Twitter account filled with sexually degrading attacks on Kamala Harris, anti-gay slurs, and far-right conspiracy theories. So guys, that means he'll get confirmed, because that's a feature, not a bug for Donald Trump. Sorry to be so negative. Okay, so now, guys, I have, even before I get to Crazy Town, I have, okay. I think, yeah, I'm trying to sort through, my friends. Okay, before I get to Crazy Town, I want to share with you Mark Wayne Mullen trying to do cleanup in aisle 47 after the terrible grilling of RFK Jr. Let's play it.
No one cares about vaccines. What we're saying is what Bobby's doing is questioning science.
But you're taking
used to it was okay
you're
to
going to
question
risk
science.
kids dying of measles?
We're not going to die. We're not taking the risk of measles. We're not anti.
More kids have died of measles in this country this year than in decades.
Well, if you want to get into that, we can talk about the open to southern border and what caused that. Because you had an inflation over 20 million people that came over illegally underneath the Biden administration.
Okay, blaming immigrants for disease. So they're going to manipulate this and claim it's not lack of vaccination. It's people coming in from our borders, right? Okay.
Administration that wasn't vaccinated. We're not talking about measles outbreaks from kids that were born and raised here inside the United States. We're talking about ones that were brought over here illegally. And you can make that connection.
Well, because people born and raised in the United States got vaccines. These people are dumber than dirt. And that is not meant to insult dirt, because dirt is an important, fertile resource for our lives. Okay, so one more thing before I get to crazy town. And this is what Representative Massey said after the phenomenal and brave Wednesday press conference, rally and press conference of the Epstein survivors. Massey decided to name one name. And when I heard this, my jaw dropped. Let's play this.
Let me give you the name of one of the billionaires who's running $2 million of ads in my district since I started this effort. His name is John Paulson. He's a hedge fund manager and a major donor to the Republican Party, a major donor to the Speaker of the House, a major donor to the president's campaign, and he's in Epstein's black book. Now, that's public, but that's indicative of the types of people who may be implicated or just embarrassed by a complete release of these files.
Okay. John Paulson, major donor to Donald Trump and the Republicans, someone who is trying to get Massey out of office. Now, that's what you may have heard. When I heard the name John Paulson, I am old enough to remember the book I wrote called Other People's Houses. My first book was published by Yale Press. I knew that I wrote about John Paulson. And for those of you who remember the financial crisis of 2008, you might remember that there were hedge fund managers. And I'm not talking about the guy from The Big Short who is made into a kind of hero, not him. But there were hedge fund managers, including a guy named John Paulson, who decided that he wanted to bet against the housing market, meaning he understood that home prices were artificially inflated due to a lot of these refinances that were orchestrated when interest rates were falling and appraisals went up. He also knew that mortgages were being offered at usurious, very high rates. Sometimes these were interest-only payments for a few years, the way your credit card is interest-only, and then suddenly you would have to pay a chunk of the principal 3 years later. These were sort of exploding. They're called they're variable adjustable rate mortgages, exploding mortgages. And when I wrote about this, it was clear and early. It was clear when these, in early 2004-ish, it was clear that when interest rates had gone up and no one wanted to refinance their home, and there was this whole mortgage sort of assembly line, these mortgage companies and banks did not want to lose out on the money they made from originating, buying, packaging, and securitizing mortgages. So they started creating these mortgages that were easy for people to pay for a little while and then jumped up. There was like a payment shock. And there are charts that were a part of board meetings at Washington Mutual that I talk about in my book, where they could pinpoint on a chart when this whole thing would fall apart, when there'd be these payment jumps from people's mortgages that were originated and they wouldn't be able to pay them. And then homes would be sold and the prices would crash and the whole thing would fall apart. And that's what did. And I'm trying to keep it really simple. So where does John Paulson come in? The same guy who's in Epstein's black book is in my not black book. And he was the guy who worked with Goldman Sachs to create a vehicle called Magnetar. You can look it up. And he created this vehicle, this synthetic structure. Try to keep it simple for you here. But if you want to know this is a pretty straightforward book, Other People's Houses. He created this synthetic vehicle, which allowed him to make money when he created a synthetic vehicle, and he worked with Goldman Sachs so he could make money when the mortgages or the mortgage securities it was tied to, crashed. And when they went out to sell the bonds, basically to fund this vehicle, they had to go out to major banks like in Germany and investors all over the country saying, invest in this thing. This super smart guy, John Paulson, is also investing in it. But what they didn't tell them is that the way in which John Paulson was investing in it was that he would fleece them. He would make all of the money and they would lose all of the money. And this shows up on page 196 and 197 of my book. And they went out and sold this. It was outrageous how they grifted. It's hard to even fully believe that this happened. And we're talking about the German bank. This was in 2007. The German bank IKB invested $150 million in this. A Dutch bank, ABN AMRO, invested $900 million in this. You might also remember the guy Fabulous Fab. Remember him testifying? Well, Fabulous Fab was also involved in this as well. And he was in 2013, Fabrice Touré, also known as Fabulous Fab, played a role with this John Paulson sham of an investment that was set up so John Paulson could make money, and Goldman Sachs helped him. Well, Fabrice Touré worked for Goldman Sachs, and I'm reading from my book. The reason why, let me just read this. In 2013, a 9-person jury found Fabrice Touré, the former Goldman Sachs vice president, liable on 6 counts of securities fraud for misleading investors in 2007 about the role hedge fund manager John Paulson played in structuring and betting against the synthetic mortgage-linked CDO structure known as Abacus. Investors lost $1 billion on the deal. In emails to his girlfriend, Touré had joked that he sold the toxic securities to quote unquote widows and orphans. When appealing his verdict, he was pursuing a doctorate in economics. Now, Goldman Sachs itself settled the matter with the SEC, not criminally, but a civil settlement for $550 million. So yes, my friends, when I saw that hedge fund manager John Paulson was in this black book, and when I understand now that John Paulson also is hugely funding the Republican Party and Trump and so on, I want to say to you, it makes me even more angry that there were not more criminal prosecutions against the bankers who engaged in this behavior. I know now enough about criminal law to know, and also the history here, that he could have been investigated and charged. The failure to hold, and I've said this again in my next book, Big Dirty Money, the failure to hold these bankers accountable after the crash led us to the place that we are. Follow the money. Now we get to Crazy Town, my friends. Crazy Town is rich. Oops, here we go. Okay. So Crazy Town is crazy because it's not every day or any day that I would rely on or quote something by James O'Keefe. You know, the right-wing guy from Project Veritas who helped bring down organizations he does this gonzo journalism where he goes undercover and manipulates people, right, to confessing things. Or the famous thing he did with this organization called Acorn was he came in, this is like over a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, came in with a young woman, and he was dressed up as if he were a pimp, and she was dressed up as if she was being trafficked. And they were asking questions of Acorn, sort of maybe legal or other kinds of advice. And then they blasted it, and it really hurt this organization's funding. And this is the kind of stuff he does. However, he just published something where a young woman went undercover, and she had a video, and she went on a date with a man who works for the Department of Justice. And I just don't understand how people just tell anyone anything on a date when they've just met them. Goes on a date, and he talks about the Epstein files, people. So you're watching an undercover video. And again, who knows why I'm sharing a James O'Keefe piece, but I think it's important because it goes to show you if this far right trickster or gonzo journalist is going after the DOJ, you can understand this Epstein file concern, and the victims, the survivors, aren't going away. Let's listen to this, and we can talk on the other side.
These files do exist.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of pages of files. They'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those files, leave all the liberal, Democratic people in those files.
I think they visited that Maxwell person.
Yeah.
And also involved.
She got transferred to a minimum security prison too recently, which is against BOP policy because she's a convicted sex offender. They're offering her something to keep it on shut.
That was the acting deputy chief of the Office of Enforcement Operations, Joseph Schnitt, telling a stranger about the FBI and DOJ's handling of the Epstein files. Schnitt, who works at a high level inside the Department of Justice, goes on to comment on the inconsistent statements, special treatment of Ghislaine Maxwell, and the blatant backtracking on promises of transparency.
And what do you do for work here?
I work for the Department of Justice.
Okay.
Been there like 23 years. I'm an analyst. I'll be acting deputy chief of our office for a few months starting next week. I work closely with all the federal law enforcement agencies and the U.S. attorney's offices, the prosecutors and stuff. The thing is, it's interesting because I do deal with so many of the agencies, like the Bureau of Prisons, the Marshal Service, the FBI, U.S. attorney's offices.
Recently, the FBI and DOJ have come under fire for promising transparency, then refusing to release footage and unredacted documents, going directly against the public's expectations and the promises made by Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel. In a DOJ press release, Attorney General Pam Bondi stated, quote, "This Department of Justice is following through on President Trump's commitment to transparency and lifting the veil on the disgusting actions of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators," unquote, and also claimed they were shedding light on Epstein's extensive network, only to later claim that Epstein was acting alone, and that the only video evidence they had was of Epstein's personal child porn collection.
Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were.
In the same press release, Kash Patel claimed, quote, "There will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, and no stone left unturned."
So on the Epstein matter or any other matters, we are diligently working on that. I'm not going to withhold information from the American public ever.
Only to later claim on Joe Rogan's podcast that releasing any videos would re-victimize those impacted.
We're not going to re-victimize women. We're not going to put that shit back out there. It's not happening, because then he wins. Not doing it. You want to hate me for it? Fine.
But, internally, there's a lot of, even within the administration, there's internal conflict.
Oh, okay.
Like, the head of FBI really wants it. Second in command at FBI has been, causing problems because he's like, no, these have to be released.
Yeah. So the FBI wants them out.
Yep, the top two guys that do that.
And Bonnie does it.
I don't know what Bonnie wants. Bonnie wants whatever Trump wants.
Sure.
Why is there suddenly this internal conflict within the same administration that
Okay, I'm going to get just to the video part here. Here we go.
leans Democrat.
Do you think like the stuff with Epstein will actually get released or not at all?
If it does, it'll be heavily redacted and his name won't be in it.
But those files do exist.
There's files.
Yeah.
For sure. There's, thousands and thousands of pages of files. But again, if they're released in any way, it's going to be very redacted. They'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those files, leave all the liberal, Democratic people in those files, and have a very slanted version of it come out where it's like, look at what he's doing without releasing any of their bad behavior.
This is James O'Keefe. You know,
I'm going to go back now to, I just want to get to the end of this clip. Okay.
The conversation then turned towards Ghislaine Maxwell and her highly publicized and unprecedented prison transfer.
They visited that Maxwell person?
Yeah.
And also involved?
She got transferred to a minimum security prison too recently, which is against BOP policy because she's a convicted sex offender. And they're not supposed to get minimum security prisons, which is an interesting detail because she's getting a benefit, which means they're offering her something to keep her mouth shut.
Okay. Couple things. Again, not normal that I'm sharing something from James O'Keefe. Couple things. I am amazed at what a good job the young woman did there. You know, just eating her salad and going, oh, you know, that Maxwell person? Like as if she didn't know Ghislaine Maxwell's name. How she's like, oh, look, she had the best sort of like acting stupid voice that I have ever seen or heard. I mean, so there you have it. Now, what we fear to be the case is true. If they release anything, they're going to make sure that names of the people that Donald Trump likes, maybe like John Paulson, don't appear there. But what we know is Massey isn't going to put up with this. Survivors aren't going to put up with this, and neither will we. Have a great weekend, prison mates. Remember, health is everything. We have to protect our physical health, our relational health, our intellectual health, our spiritual health, and our mental health. And part of that is looking things straight in the face as they are. And that's why this show was dedicated to telling you something you already know, that RFK must be stopped. He is a psycho killer, doesn't understand science, and is compromised in so many ways. Have a fabulous weekend. And one thing, remember, I'm going to talk about it next week, but as AJ said, October 18th is another No Kings rally. We'll talk about it. No, I'm sorry. Did I say October 18th? Yes, October 18th. We've got a whole month to prepare. Is another No Kings Day rally. We'll talk about it next week. We really need to build a giant crowd. We need to get to 11 million people. And with that, I bid you adieu.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Gen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Gen Taub Show.